welcome back to Devils United, another preview, and Craig is back again. How are you, Craig?
Yeah, very well, thank you, and Happy New Year to everybody.
Happy New Year to you too, Craig. It's been a while. The last time you came on the channel, it was an Ethan-led review on how he was at Bournemouth, but this time round, it's a Premier League preview.
It is, yes, yep. And, it's great to be back in the Premier League. We've not found it easy going. And of course, our start was absolutely terrible, even though, yes, we won against Villa, a great opening day win. But yeah, we'll probably discuss the subsequent 3 games. The Man City one wasn't too bad, even though we did get beat 4-0. I know it sounds stupid saying that, but yeah, to be honest, the other 2 were a lot worse.
Before we get onto it, we will quickly jump into the comments because there's quite a few already. Good evening, Luca. I hope you're well. Thanks for coming in. Looks like you've changed your picture, Luca. Looks very good. Hey there, Reese. I hope you're well. Thank you for coming in. Good evening, Niall. I hope you are well. Thank you for coming in. Reese is mentioning about a potential link from Real Sociedad. No clue who he is. So, let's have a see. Reese and now talking in between each other. And good evening, Andrew. I hope you are well. Thank you for coming in. Hey there as well to Rather. Andrew's already started off by saying Bournemouth fighting hard. Fair play to them. So we'll start off with how your season for you has gone so far. Because I know when we was touching on it a bit backstage earlier on, I did say you was probably about whereabouts where people was probably expecting your ifs maybe a little bit higher.
Yeah, I think anything above 17th or above is absolutely fine this season. That was the expectation at the start of the year. I think Bill Foley, the new owner who's taken over from Maxim Denham, is expecting probably a little bit more. But I would still say 17th would constitute a good season. I would like to be in this sort of position where we are now come May, because we don't really want to be dragged in to the last day battle. That's the last thing we want, especially with the money that is probably going to be spent and invested into the club as well. Season so far, we got a very good victory against Villa opening day of the season.
Yep.
And then we had a run of 3 games. Those games were against Man City, Arsenal, and Liverpool.
You couldn't have a worse run.
No, it was a nightmare run to start off a season in the Premier League. Went up to Manchester City, was beaten 4-0. We did keep Haaland quiet that game, but they had so much quality that we did get undone in other areas of the pitch. And that, out of the 3, even though we did get beat 4-0, was probably the best performance. The home game against Arsenal followed up, and we just stood off them again, gave them too much respect, and we was 2-0 down in the first 10 minutes. And from that point, against a team like Arsenal, that's going to be very, very difficult. You're not going to come back from that sort of situation. Couldn't do very much about the third goal. Saliba's goal was outstanding, but ultimately a disappointing game because of how we started it. We did grow into it a bit, and then we come to the Liverpool game where I was at, and that was painful. I think everybody knows what the score was there.
Yeah, and then after the Liverpool game, when actually, don't worry, Craig, because Liverpool's been on a down ever since.
Yep.
So that's one positive. But since then, you have sacked Scott Parker. And you did end up getting Gary O'Neill, and I was looking at it. It was his first managerial appointment, was it, being Bournemouth manager?
Yeah, so he was put in charge on a temporary basis initially. Just going back to that Liverpool defeat, of course, which was 9-0. We was absolutely terrible that day. We stood off them. We didn't have any control of that match. I don't think we even had an opportunity on target. They ran rings around us. Senesi at the back, it was his first game in English football, looked a bit lost. And then Scott Parker, and this is what did it. It wasn't so much the 9-0 defeat, but it was what Scott Parker came out and said
That is
afterwards.
interview, wasn't it? What done it?
Yeah. And I listened to that interview from a pub in Liverpool, and I was completely shocked because it was a case of him turning around and saying, "We're expecting many more defeats like this. We're not good enough." He'd already said earlier on in that transfer window, before the season had even started, that he wanted more investment. And he got the player that he wanted in Senesi in the back line. And the 9-0 defeat, could have been brushed over had he not said what he did, because we've got a very young team. Adam Smith is the oldest player in that side. Um, you've got the likes of Jordan Zamora, Jaden Anthony, and players like that who are at the early part of their career. And if you imagine listening to your manager turn around and saying, they're not good enough, we're expecting many more heavy defeats, I need more players, that is going to knock their confidence for six. And I was invited on to 606 on the way back, spoke to Robbie Savage and Chris Sutton, and their argument was that Scott Parker deserved a bit more time and deserved a bit more funds. And my view was, well, no, he's got what he's got. Unfortunately, we can't spend what the likes of Nottingham Forest were doing. At this point in time, we didn't know really about the new owners coming in. I think there was probably murmurings, and of course, Maxim Denham didn't want to spend too much money with that in mind. Um, and their view was, well, he deserves that bit more time, deserves that bit more funds because he's got you there. We were strong in the championship last year. Our squad was strong. It's a nightmare of a league to get out of, but at points, we got 37 points from the first 15 games in the championship, and we looked to be flying. And by the end of it, we needed the penultimate game against Nottingham Forest to actually secure promotion. At that point, at the early stage of the season, I thought we might have even gone for the championship points record, which would have been nice.
Hmm.
And that's 106. Of course, we couldn't do that. That's a very, very difficult thing to do. But at the same time, um, Scott Parker did drop the ball on a number of occasions. We got beat by Derby, got beat by Peterborough. And my view was that he had to go. Even that early in, we was warned by the Fulham fans that this was what he was like. Look at Fulham now; they're flying. Scott Parker didn't play Mitrovic, and that really, says it all. It really says it all. But moving back on to Gary O'Neill, and I did see a comment there. Kiefer Moore was on fire that day.
Hmm.
He was very, very good. I did at one point not think that Kiefer Moore was going to be able to make it in the Premier League. But then believe it or not, that was the day of the Spurs game, and he played up front with Solanke and was fantastic. So I think he can, but of course it depends what sort of style. But Gary O'Neill come in, he got the best result that you can do coming off the back of a 9-0 defeat, and that's a 0-0 draw. It was against Wolves. Wolves aren't particularly very good, but we kept a clean sheet and was able to build from there. He also changed the goalkeeper, brought in Neto. Neto was signed by Scott Parker, but he was bent on the bench because Mark Travers had helped the club get into the Premier League in the first place. So he made that bold call early on. We then went to Nottingham Forest, was 2-0 down, staring defeat in the face, come back to 3-2. And I think a lot of Bournemouth fans aren't particularly fond of the appointment of Gary O'Neill. However, I think he's done a fantastic job. And my question to them, and I don't think I've really had a suitable answer, is who else? Who who else would come into this club and do better than what Gary O'Neill has? There's a couple of names that I did think of when we was toying with Marcelo Bielsa. And
He would have been a good shout, but he's one of them Bielsa where when it comes to his third season, it goes all tits up basically.
yeah, it does. It does. And to be fair, he didn't do a great job with Leeds. So I personally think, well, he did a great job with Leeds, but they were really struggling. I think he'd lost, maybe not lost the changing room, but lost that momentum that they had. And I think it was the right decision for them to actually replace him at that time. Jesse Marsh, I don't think particularly was the right person to bring in for Leeds, but um, I think that the only other alternatives would be somebody like Carlos Corberán, who had left Huddersfield. He's now at West Bromwich Albion. They're doing very, very well from the position they were. They were bottom of the league when Steve Bruce was sacked, and he's got them into a position where they're now fighting just outside the playoffs. I think they won again today, 1-0. The other person, Ronald Koeman, for me, but neither of those names were actually discussed. And I think Gary O'Neill was the sensible choice. He's done well. He's done well, and it was off the back of that Everton game. We won 3-0. Everton, admittedly, are very, very poor. I don't know how much you've seen of Everton this season, but yeah,
Everton are on par with Wolves for me this season. Dreadful.
yeah.
They're just very, very boring team.
Oh, they're awful. I was shocked how poor they were. We had the cup game against them, and we beat them 4-1 that day. And they got goal back when we was 2-1 up. That's 2-0 up. So brought it back to 2-1. And I thought, well, this is a little bit worrying because we'd recently been beaten by Leeds 4-3 after being 3-1 up, and Spurs after being 2-0 up 3-2. But Everton showed none of that, and then we beat them in the league as well. But going back to what we're all about, I think it was the right decision. I stand by the decision. I think the club have done the right thing and employed from within. Don't get me wrong, Gary O'Neill is going to make mistakes. Eddie Howe made mistakes, but at the same time, it shows that belief within. If we don't start picking up results, and one question I was asked, I was on Talk TV yesterday, and one question which I was asked is Gary O'Neill safe? And my honest answer is no, because of the new ownership. Where, who who else can we bring in at this point in time? Carlos Corberán's at West Brom. He probably want to stay there now. Ronald Koeman would be a sensible choice from me, but we don't want a Sean Dyche, or we don't. I don't think we suit a Sean Dyche. It's very difficult to think. Somebody's even mentioned Ralph Hasenhüttl to me, who is at Southampton.
I do like Ralph Hasenhüttl, but I just think the problem is with Southampton is that he has had lack of investment, and I think if he was at a club who had serious investment in it, he would do brilliant. I think he's got the right tactics, but it was just the way the team was played and the ownership what made it worse.
Yeah, completely agree. I think Southampton will go down this season. I just hope we don't go with them. But I think we did the right thing. I think he is under pressure because the new owners, and I think what the new owners will be looking for is at least 6 points out of the next 12. So, of course, we've got Manchester United, then we've got Brentford, and then we have got Forest and Brighton as well. So you would think this is a bonus game for us. If we get anything from Manchester United, I think it's nice, but we don't expect anything. But that now then leaves 3 games where I think he would need to get 6 points. Anything less than that, I think the alarm bells might be ringing in Bill Foley's head.
Yeah, I definitely see where you're coming from. In terms, I know we've already touched on a bit of the ownership as well. Michael Jordan's supposed to be a past owner, I believe.
He is,
Um,
yeah.
yeah, and then so in terms of the ownership, um, I'm sure you probably would have been happy. Into what have you made of new ownership? What do you think is the long term ambition is for the ownership? Because looking at it right at this moment in time, it's obviously going to be staying up in the league, just as
Yeah.
Newcastle's was in their ownership first come across, but theirs eventually was to win the Premier League. But what do you think the ambitions would be for the new Bournemouth owners?
Well, I've actually met a couple of people, not Bill Foley or Michael B. Jordan, but I've met a couple of people around the ownership. Just going back to Maxim Denim, Maxim was a very, very quiet owner. He let Neil Blake and Richard Hughes and Jeff Mostyn really get on with it. And they did a fantastic job. But Maxim Denim's wealth, and he is just the one person. He did get some investment, but I believe some of those investors then sold their stakes back. Um, it was always going to be very, very difficult for him to compete with the amount of money. Looking at this new ownership model, Bill Foley and his company, Canay Holdings, have got a significant stake in in the club. Also, Michael B. Jordan's there, a gentleman called Nulla Saka. Probably goes a little bit more under the radar than the other two because they're bigger names. But if you look into Nulla Saka, he is actually part of Gerald Piqué's Cosmos Group, who do have an ownership in FC Andorra in Spain. So of course, Man United fans will know Gerald Piqué quite well,
Yeah.
and you know there is a lot of promise there, and that's quite exciting because they're a club that have gone from, I believe it was the fifth tier, and they've got them into the second league in Spain, so just outside. So I think that's quite exciting. Um, I think for me, um, from speaking to them, the first aim is to keep the club in the Premier League. So they
Yeah.
will invest in the playing team. The training grounds is already being restarted, which is great. That was started under Maxim Denim. It all went a little bit quiet due to the COVID period, but that has now started progressing again. I also know that their new owners have been going around the ground, having a look at all the perimeter and establishing whether or not Dean Court can be expanded. I would love to stay at Dean Court. Don't get me wrong. It's our home. It's an intimidating place to go to. It is the smallest ground in the Premier League by quite some quite some margin, and I think only Wimbledon really had a smaller ground when
Yeah.
they were about. Do I think that's going to happen? I don't think so. I think they're going to build a new ground, and that is going to be the plans. But they've looked at all eventualities, and I think that they are well invested with the club. Bill Foley, whereas Maxim Denon was very, very reserved, you didn't see him very much. He was great at the promotion party back in 2015. He's proper celebrating, that that was quite an evening. Being promoted for the first time.
Yeah.
But if you look at Bill Foley, he's very much out there. He's already done conferences where he's turned around and said, "We're not being relegated." So that's a bold, bold statement. And do remember, he's somebody who brought ice hockey to Las Vegas, the middle of the desert. So he's a bold
And
man.
it gets very, very hot there as well. Like I literally was there in October, so I don't know how they could do that.
I haven't a clue. It's Las Vegas looks an amazing place. Hopefully might get a chance to go over there as well and watch the Vegas Golden Knights, which is the team.
Oh,
But
lovely.
if you look at that team as well, and when I was on Talk TV, I was speaking to Ray Houghton, and Ray Houghton made a good point. Why has Bill Foley not gone for a Man United? Why has he not gone for a Liverpool or an Arsenal? Somebody who is big with a stadium established, who he can progress. If you look at what he's done in the States, that was a new franchise team. So he started from absolutely nothing and built that team to actually compete for the Stanley Cup. I'm not an ice hockey fan. I don't know much about ice hockey, to be
Neither
perfectly
do I.
honest. But that is some feat considering it's a new franchise over there, and I think that is why he's picked Bournemouth rather than picking a more established Premier League club.
Mm.
Everton might have been a club that you could have said, well, would be a perfect club for him because they're building stadium, and
Well, could they be in debt if they was pay if they're building that stadium?
well, that's the thing. But of course, we're going to have to do something with ours. Our stadium isn't actually owned by the football club. Um,
Yep.
It's actually owned by a company called Structure. It was sold years and years ago by a gentleman called Peter Phillips, who was one of the old members of the board, just to keep the club surviving. And this is this is what's crazy about being in the Premier League with a club like Man United, who are well established. We, for the majority of our time in existence, have been merely surviving and struggling through. And actually, I would recommend any Man United fans who do want to hear about the struggles watch some interviews with Trevor Watkins. I've got two parts on the channel, and also Eddie Mitchell, because it really highlights how the club was never making any profit whatsoever. It was hand to mouth. Um, we had people taking stock out of the club shop because the club just couldn't pay their debts. Um, and look at where we are now. And
Hmm.
that's thanks to Maxim, Eddie Mitchell, and of course Bill Foley. It's a completely different world we're in now, which is exciting,
One good
amazing.
thing at least.
Oh crikey! You, you couldn't imagine the absolute hell that this club's been through, and it's very very exciting, this new ownership.
Hmm. Absolutely, and I think for me, probably the aim is probably going to be mid-table to the Europa League spots there for Bournemouth. And I know you've already mentioned about Gary O'Neill. He's under pressure, and a lot of people thought the same about Eddie Howe when the new ownership comes in. But maybe if he had, I know you already mentioned that you will have a higher budget in the January. If he had
Mhm.
the higher budget, just as Newcastle did, I know I keep referring to Newcastle, but
Yeah.
because it's more of a recent thing. But
Mhm.
if you have the right investment with him having the right players in who suit Gary O'Neill's style of play, then you may not even need a brand new manager. You may just be able to develop more and more under him.
Yeah, I completely agree, and I've got a lot of time for Gary O'Neill. I've actually met him. I met him fairly recently and
Mm,
had a lengthy chat with him. And he's such a likable guy. He is a proper professional. He'll be studying every single team and their weaknesses inside out before every game. So he'll be looking at that. Like everybody, he's not always going to get it right, but I think the effort, it's if you compare him against Eddie Howe and Scott Parker, Eddie Howe was very, very meticulous in what he did. He used to be in first thing in the morning, and this is something that Eddie Mitchell mentioned to me. He used to be in first thing in the morning. Eddie Mitchell tried to even come in earlier and earlier because he wanted to beat Eddie to actually getting into the building, and was the last one to leave at night as well. Um, and I think Gary O'Neill is of that mould. I think Scott Parker moved away from that quite a bit. Was a little bit more relaxed with the players. Personally, I think Gary will be good for the club if we stand by him. But have we got the time? Have the owners got the Palace defeat on Saturday? Yes, it was very disappointing. It was the worst performance under Gary O'Neill. I think myself as a fan, I've got all the time in the world for Gary, and I hope that it comes good. I think the owners will expect results as soon as they start spending this money, and that's why I say 6 points out in the next 12. So next 4 games is probably going to be a minimum for them. Has he got the backing of all the fans? I think the silent majority he probably has. Um, Remember, he has recently been appointed permanently, but the loud minority, I think, were hoping for a bigger name. And the thing is, we're Bournemouth. We have no divine right to be in this division, and we've got no divine right to demand a bigger name than what we've got.
Hmm. Absolutely, and you don't even know if you had a bigger name who's been in the Premier League. Like you look at Claudio Ranieri, big name, went to Watford, didn't work out. You don't know if that could have been the exact same situation. A big name doesn't necessarily mean they'd suit Bournemouth.
To be honest, that's the perfect example. To be honest, Maisie, because Claudio Ranieri did a fantastic job at Leicester. I think a lot of the groundwork was put in place there by Nigel Pearson, but Claudio Ranieri tied that all together and built that team into something that you completely shocked English football. He wasn't the right person for Watford. I'm not sure if there is a right person for Watford, considering
No.
how they, to be fair, they switch their managers I think they go through more managers than I ever hot dinners. To be fair, but
That's a good comparison.
but yeah, I think personally, you know, I think he is ingrained into the club. We've promoted from within on most occasions. Scott Parker being the exception. Even Jonathan Woodgate was here before being appointed. Jason Tyndall, of course, was Eddie Howe's number 2, and he's Eddie Howe's number 2 at Newcastle. Unfortunately, it didn't work out for him in the Championship. I think he probably is too much of a number 2. He's more of a coach. He's good on the training ground. Is he very authoritative? No, Jason Tyndall never was. So I think Gary O'Neill, I stand by him, but I think the owner's patience will be fairly thin because of what their expectations or what their wishes are.
Hmm. Absolutely. We'll jump into some of the comments. There is some questions for you as well, Craig, which have
Yeah, go
starred.
for it.
Hey there, Hassel. I hope you're well. Thank you for coming in. Hassel laughing at the Liverpool fans in the chat.
Why couldn't we do that?
Well, you may get some bragging rights later on. You never know.
Oh yeah, I tell you what, we have to give Liverpool a bit of a beating after what they did to us.
Yeah, exactly. You want the revenge.
Yes, most definitely.
And we will probably want to do the double, which hasn't happened for a long time. But
Yeah.
Reese has asked for you, Craig, where do you want to see Bournemouth strengthened, if possible, in January and beyond?
I've picked out a couple of positions, so I think we need some more strength up front. I think what we've got to look at as well is who we're going to lose in this window, or who is going to be seen now as surplus to requirements. I think Jamal Lowe. Um, I rate Jamal Lowe. He's a top professional. Is he good enough for the Premier League? I don't think so. So I think he'll be going out, and I think we need to get another striker of good quality in, just in case anything happens to Solanke or anything happens to Kiefer Moore, and something that will offer something a little bit different. Kiefer Moore's a big target man, can bring the ball down, and then Solanke does track back a little bit. So they complement each other quite well. Solanke is probably better on his own up front than if you put Kiefer Moore up there on his own up front. So I would say somebody who can play on their own, but would complement probably Solanke more than Kiefer Moore. So
Mhm.
that's what I would say. With regards to the midfield, I think we've got a similar situation there where we've got Ben Pearson and Emi Marcondes. Emi Marcondes is such a lovely guy. We signed him from Brentford. He's loves the fans, loves the club. Unfortunately, I don't think it's doing him and his career any good by staying at this football club at this moment in time, because his opportunities are going to be limited a lot more. Likewise, Ben Pearson, he's a bit of a terrier, a bit of a tough midfielder. We signed him from Preston, very, very low transfer figure. I think it was great bit of business, but I don't think that he is capable of playing week in, week out in the Premier League. Out the two, probably would keep Pearson more for those scrappy games and to surprise a couple of teams, and probably against teams like Man United and Man City and Liverpool, where he can offer something a little bit different and is a little bit more gritty. But I think we've got the midfield fairly covered. Joe
Mhm.
Rothwell's, come back into the mix after a long injury. We signed him from Blackburn. He looks good. So I think midfield's fine. Defensive wise is the big one. So on the left we've got Jordan Zamora. Right we have Adam Smith. Ryan Frederick sometimes plays, and Adam Smith moves over to the left, and Fredericks goes in at the right. Um, it's centre back pairing which is a concern for me, and the main reason behind that, Metham has done very, very well. We was a bit worried about him at the start of the season. He didn't get much game time in the championship. I think deserved so as well.
Mhm.
But he's really shone this season. He's pulled his socks up and is doing a very, very good job. Um, I think Senesi, if he plays in his right position, which personally is the left hand side of that centre back pairing, he's fine. If he plays on the right hand side of that centre back pairing, and I know it's only a shift across, he looks a lot less of a talent. And Lloyd Kelly is my main concern at the moment, which is a shame because he was strong last season. Um, but in
Mhm.
the games so far since he's come back, he's been incredibly poor. He was incredibly poor against Crystal Palace. We know that there's a good player in there. Um, I'm not saying we should sell him during this window. I don't think that at all. But I think he needs a little bit more time to actually get himself up to the standard. And I think that's why we need one or maybe even two centre backs coming in. Because if two of those players that we've got at the moment get injured, it is going to be Metham, Kelly, or Senesi alongside James Hill, who his last bit of football was for, well, league football was for Fleetwood Town, and I think he's going to struggle coming straight in. Goalkeeping position, I think as well, we probably need somebody else, probably as a backup, but also to push Neto, who should be coming back to full fitness, and I'm hoping that he'll start tomorrow night.
Mhm. I know you mentioned about signings. Would you take any loanee signings at this moment in time? Because I know one what we have. I know you're probably not gonna. For instance, at Man United, one that we're looking at putting on loan is, for instance, like Anthony Elanga. Would he be someone that you'd want to take, or would you just want to take an experienced player who you could buy to develop the team further?
I think we need to look at some experience,
Mhm.
and I think And I'm not saying that Elanga's a poor player.
No, he's only been
Totally
in
the opposite.
the team since second half of last season, so he's got barely about a year's experience now in the Premier League.
I think he would be a perfect player to go on loan into the Championship, and very much like Nat Phillips did with us.
Yep.
Nat Phillips, if he is available from Liverpool on loan, I would take him back. Um, he's not done particularly very well, but at the same time, I think he would be, the sort of loan signing that I'd want. Um, of course, Ethan Laird did a very good job here,
Yep.
and he would be the sort of signing. So those two would know the club.
Yeah.
Um, However, I think what Bill Foley is going to look at doing, and the figure that is floated around at the moment, and there's lots of figures being floated around, and there's lots of rumours, and we've been linked to players like Weston McKennie of Juventus, which is crazy considering the club we are. But the figures that have been floated around is 78 million in this January transfer market, which personally, if we spend that, we're probably going to be in the top 5 spenders in the Premier League during this window. But it's spending it sensibly. And
And getting the right ones.
yeah, don't get me wrong. If Weston McKennie was available and Gary O'Neill could do a deal for a player like that, which was sensible, then I'd say, yeah, that's fine. But if we are going to sign a player like that and spend 30, 40 million, it's a big no for me.
Yeah, I definitely see where you're coming from. Absolutely. Next question from Raver: how impressed have you been with certain players and your style of play this season?
With Gary O'Neill's style, I think, uh, he's improved the team a hell of a lot. Scott Parker's style didn't really work. It worked against Villa, but it didn't work in subsequent 3 games. We should have been competitive. If we had lost all 3 by a single goal or a couple of goals, absolutely fine. But it was the nature of conceding. How many are we talking? 16 goals in 3 games. That's completely unacceptable at
Mm-hmm.
any level. Um, I think, yeah, in answer to that, the style, Gary O'Neill has improved it. Sometimes I feel some of his substitutions are being a little bit suspect, but then maybe there's reasons behind that. Maybe it's injuries. Lewis Cook, I don't think should have been pulled off against Crystal Palace. I don't think Phil Billings should have been pulled off against Crystal Palace. But overall, I think the style and the approach to games has been a lot better, and it's been a lot more Eddie Howe than it has been Scott Parker.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I know this is probably going off topic a tiny bit, but I was watching this video and I see like 2 of the lowest wages in Premier League is 2 of your players, and there was on like 700 quid a week.
Mm. Um, I believe that, yeah, I think that there is, and the 2 players that you might be mentioning
Yeah.
is Jaden Anthony and Jordan Zamora.
Yep.
Now, of course, those 2 have come through our academy,
Okay.
and I am absolutely desperate to keep those 2 at the club because they have done fantastically well. They work together as a partnership. Jordan Zamora plays just behind Jaden Anthony, and the link up play, the best friends, is excellent. There's been rumours that other clubs have wanted them, but I think they probably do come as a package because they are that good. Um, if you take Jordan Zamora out the team, you get less of a Jaden Anthony, and vice versa as well. Um, I think, yeah, personally, those 2 players those will be big signings for us if we can get them tied down to long-term contracts, which
Mm-hmm.
is what they deserve.
Understandable. Hey there, Vincent. I hope you're well. Thank you for coming in. And hey there, Renee. I hope you're well. Thank you for coming in. Nyla's asked, would you take back Matt Ritchie or Ryan Fraser?
Oh dear, no. I would take back Matt Ritchie, probably on a short-term deal. Um, I think the man is a legend. I think Jaden Anthony could learn quite a bit from Matt Ritchie. Ryan Fraser, no, I wouldn't even touch him with a barge pole, considering the last time. And to be fair, Ryan Fraser has upset Eddie Howe again. Uh, to give you a bit of background on this story,
Okay.
um, of course, the COVID pandemic happened and the season was delayed. Ryan Fraser was out of contract at the end of the season, and the rumours at that point was that he was being muted with a move to Arsenal. I think it was all agent talk. I had David Beckham's former agent on the show and discussed with him this situation. I said, look, do you think this is, the agent actually controlling this? And he said, I don't think, I know that this is what the case is. But Ryan Fraser didn't sign that contract extension to play once Project Restart began. And it's a bugbear. It's something that makes a lot of Bournemouth fans very angry because it was a short-term contract that we wanted him to sign. I think he let down Eddie Howe. Eddie Howe, of course, then left the club, and he did look a bit dejected. I think he felt let down, not just by Ryan, but a couple of players, maybe Josh King as well at the club. But Ryan Fraser should have signed that contract. And at Newcastle, I think he's doing the same. I don't think he's pulling his weight, and no, I wouldn't want him at this club. And personally, I think he probably deserves to end up in the Championship for me.
Mm-hmm. Ravi asked for us both. Where in the game do you both, where you both will have more joy? I think for me, Man United is better in the wide areas, and I think that's probably where we'll probably get the most joy, especially with the 4-4-2. I think the 4-4-2 can be a bit open depending on how it does get used. So I think that's where they're going to be looking into for Rashford, Anthony, Martial to cut in and then try and score that way. But where would you see joy from, for your point of view?
I would say the centre of midfield. And that's why I say midfield is probably the least of our worries because we have got Jefferson Lerma in there, Lewis Cook and Phil Billing. Those players will normally play as a midfield three. And Jefferson Lerma probably a little bit more defensively than the other two. Um, they're three very strong players. They know each other inside out, and I think that is probably where we're going to get the most joy. Out wide, I think we're quite good. The weakest area of the team is ultimately the centre of defence. If Lloyd Kelly plays and Marcus Rashford is running up against him, I think Rashford is probably going to get, quite a field day. Sorry, Matt from the channel, I have stolen that from you, but but yeah, I think Rashford will really tear into Lloyd Kelly considering his current form, unless Lloyd Kelly somehow has a miraculous recovery and a fantastic game, but I can't see it.
Mm-hmm. Reese has got a question for you now. Who's been your standout player this season, and who has been your biggest concern? I know you mentioned Lloyd Kelly being one, but
Yeah. Standout player for me this season, Philip Billing. I think Billings, he's a very tall player. He's not brilliant in the air, but he's quite skillful for a tall player. He's clever. Um, I think he's a confidence player as well. If he's not confident, you'll see it. But we saw that against Leicester actually. He played against Leicester, and did look like he didn't seem himself, but he grew into that game, got a goal, and then was a completely different player thereafter. So if he's on form, I think he will be the standout player for us, and I think he has been the best player so far this season. In terms of concerns, I think Lloyd Kelly is well. I would hope Gary O'Neill goes with Metham and Senesi, but I'm not sure. I think Mark Travers has struggled a little bit confidence-wise as well. So I'd say those two are probably, and I think Senesi's still very new to English football. I think we got to give him a little bit more time, but I would say Lloyd Kelly and Mark Travers. Travers, good goalkeeper, don't get me wrong, but I think there is that confidence lacking from that Liverpool result. And I don't think he's really shown what he can do in the Premier League so far.
Absolutely. Next question here. This is more of a transfer one from Niall. I heard it myself today about Josh Brownhall being linked to yourselves from Burnley. How true is it? Do you think that's going to happen, that transfer?
To be honest, I've seen the rumours. I think that it would be a sensible signing. However, Burnley may demand a lot more. They are top of the Championship by quite some way now, and therefore, do they need to sell? Probably not. And we could be paying over the odds for a player that might not be able to add a great deal. I think, like I say, we've got to sign players sensibly, and if we can bring in the right players for the right price, we'll be absolutely fine.
Absolutely, I completely agree. You need to do what's best suited for your manager. So,
yeah.
Good evening, Solo. I hope you're well. Thank you for coming in. Andrew said you're the most welcoming club on the South Coast for sure.
Oh yeah, definitely. Well, at the end of the day, the only other club on the South Coast, well, I guess Brighton, but yeah, the only other club in the Premier League on the South Coast is that lot down the M27. They're not very welcoming at all. Let's be fair.
I'm sorry as well to Aaron, but Brighton is not very welcoming after the way they treated us. That 4-1 loss at the Amex, so 4-0 loss, sorry, at the Amex. So
yeah,
no.
fair enough. But yeah, Southampton, you don't want to go
Yeah.
there.
Oh, it's the worst ground possible for going
Yeah,
there.
it's a
Oh.
miserable place. I just don't like it very much. Hope no Southampton fans are on here. Sorry.
Oh no, I don't know any. It's fine.
Oh, that's good. That's good.
Question as well for Rather from Rather. Can Bournemouth stay in the Premier League for a long time? Could happen with new owners.
I think if we get through this season, and of course Bill Foley's taken over mid-season, mid-term, possibly. If we go down, I think the Championship is a nightmare to get out of. Would we get out of it first time of asking? I'd hope so, with the players that we've got at the moment. We've done it, of course, last season, but we don't want to go there. And if we can stay 17th or higher, perfect. After that, Bill Foley can really put his stamp on things, really change things around, maybe even change the manager, change the whole philosophy of the club, change the stadium, get the training ground completed. We could be here for a long, long time. And that's what we hope, is just keeping ourselves above that dreaded line.
Yeah, and I think as well, just as people said in the chat, we like Bournemouth, and we like to have them kind of teams who come up from the Championship and actually work to stay in the Premier League. Because you look at West Brom, you look at Norwich, who's up and down constantly,
Yeah.
and I think it gives unfair unfair competition for people who are in the Championship who's working to go up to the Premier League, because the team's too good for the Championship, but it's not good enough for the Premier League.
Yeah, completely agree. And the Premier League, the Championship is a graveyard of old Premier League clubs. You look, well, even some of them have dropped into League One, like Sheffield Wednesday,
Wigan
Derby,
being another.
Wigan are in the Championship. They look like
Oh,
they're
they're in
going
the
back.
Championship. I thought they moved
Yeah,
into League One now.
they were, but it looks like they might be going back there this
Oh, okay.
season. Reading are in financial strife. They're under an embargo. They've actually done quite well, all things considering. They're the only one because if you look at Sheffield Wednesday, Derby, and Reading, they all sold their ground. And it's a weird thing. They sold their ground to try and beat FFP. Derby and Sheffield Wednesday got done for it, got relegated. Reading have also got done for it, but seem to be keeping themselves above that line. So they're probably the big winners out of the three.
Coffee's comment made me laugh. If Steve Bruce becomes Norwich manager, that's them not returning to the Premier League.
Oh, completely agree with that. Yeah, completely agree with that. Look at what he did at West Brom, and West Brom have shown that and Carlos Corberan hasn't signed any players. Remember,
Yep.
he is using Steve Bruce's team, and he's got them just outside the playoffs. Whereas Steve Bruce had them 24th out of 24 teams, and that's below some poor teams in there, like Wigan, like Blackpool, like Huddersfield.
Yeah, it just speaks a lot, doesn't it?
Yeah.
From Ravi, the Brathgott has actually gone back to Newcastle. Woo. Let's just say that's all I'm gonna say about the Brathgott. Back with Ravi's question, do you think United's defence can be got at from yourself? Bear in mind, United hasn't conceded any goals with Varane and Casemiro playing. And 1 in 9 with just Varane.
Personally, it's going to be very, very difficult for us to break down the defence. And we were speaking earlier on, Maisy, weren't we, that things have improved since Cristiano Ronaldo has left the club. I think the whole mentality at Man United is on and up, which is a good thing to see. And personally, I think it's going to be very, very difficult for us.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the thing is, if Martinez doesn't play, you've got a better chance of scoring.
Yeah.
But if Martinez plays with Varane, I'm not too sure. I think we could potentially keep a clean sheet. Rabi's gone for a surprising 2-1 win for United. He's the one I told you about who's always betting against us, and he's always wrong. Now he's betting for us, and now I'm scared that we're going to lose. Now I'm scared here. Hey there, Liam. I hope you're well. Thank you for coming in. Hey there to Henry. I hope you're well. Thank you for coming in. Hey there to Just Me. I hope you're well. Thank you for coming in. Luca's gone for 3-0 for Man United. Mila is in the chat. Hey there, Mila. As a Watford fan, I hope Bournemouth stay up. Great club. Respect.
That's
See, you're
nice
getting even love off Watford.
Yeah, that's a nice thing to hear from a Watford fan.
Well, yeah, that's very true. Yeah, Ravi said United, Rashford brace. Hey there, Martin. I hope you well. Thank you for coming in. Hey there, I like coffee. I hope you well. Thank you for coming in. Hey there, Haxel. I hope you well. Thanks for coming in. Now's got the 2-1 for United. Andrew's got 3-0 for United. Tom said, we've got Bournemouth, then City. If we beat them both and City draw against Chelsea, we'll be above them, but don't think we'll beat City. Be a tough one, that's for sure. I'm going to ask this funny question, what Ravi has wrote, just to finish off the stream. Craig, do you think Man City have copied the style of your home shirt? It looks very familiar.
Yeah, it does actually. It looks identical to this, doesn't it? This was the one that we won the championship in. Well, Force finished second in the championship, got promotion in. Yeah, I think they should just leave the red and black stripes to us.
Well, you should see our potentially new away kit next season. That's exactly like Newcastle's shirt. Yeah, it's exactly like Newcastle's shirt. I was like, oh dear. I don't think Newcastle fans would be very happy with that, that's for sure. We'll wrap it up here. Thank you, Craig, for coming on. It's been a great show and it's been great catching back up with you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Maisy. It's always a pleasure to come on.
Oh, you're welcome. Would you like to give your score prediction and shout out your socials?
Of course. So I normally don't bet against my own team, but to be fair, I think this is going to be a very difficult game, and I don't think it'll be a high-scoring game. Maybe a 1-0 loss. Let's go with a 1-0 loss. I'm hoping we can get a goal, but I think it'll be very, very difficult. So I'm hoping the reverse psychology, because I said we was going to beat Palace at the weekend. Hopefully that works again. But you never know.
Well, Ravi's on your side as well. He predicted us to win, so.
But the socials, so you can find us at UTC IAD AFCB. Thank you, Ravi, for that. So we've got loads of interviews. We've had Eddie Mitchell on there. We've had Kieran Maguire, Mark McAdam from Sky Sports. Loads of people. Trevor Watkins. If you want to find out about the history of this football club, that is a really interesting one to watch. It's about 2 hours long, over 2 parts, but it's a proper rags to riches story. So yeah, please let us know what you think, and yeah, all subscriptions will really help. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Just as Ravi's put it in the chat, I put your link in the description as well. So if you
Excellent.
haven't already, go and subscribe to Craig. I Like Coffee's gone for a 4-0 for United. I'm not going to be as confident as I Like Coffee, but I'll go for 2-0. We're not really an attacking team in terms of scoring a lot of goals in a game. And I think you are better defensive than Forest. Not that it's very hard to be, but
Yeah.
you get it. But
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Craig, for coming back on. It's been great, and hopefully we'll get you back on the next Bournemouth preview. But
Almost.
but take care, everyone. Have a lovely week. Bye bye.